Today's session is entitled The Supreme Mind. When we're talking about the Supreme Mind, we are not talking about God or any deity, be they called Re, Anu, El Shaddai or Shaddai, Adonai, Hashem, Jehovah, Jesus, or God. When we're talking about the Supreme Mind, we are talking about mind over matter. We are talking about mind before the cosmos, before the universe, literally, because mere matter cannot manifest mind and life. And as life is manifested in the universe, mind is unmanifested. And might I add, it is unmanifested before the universe existed. I have just used a quote from this book that you can inquire about on smpbooks@yahoo.com. This book is entitled, and I quoted, a fantastic, brilliant line from the sacred wisdom of Tahuti Thoth. When we're talking about the Supreme Mind, and we mentioned we're talking about mind over matter, this is also saying mind is over matter. This is also saying mind is before the universe, space, quantum fluctuations, dark energy, and dark matter. To go further and to explain to you more in more details, let's now turn to what non-religious people subscribe to being the birth of the universe, or that which is responsible for the universe coming into existence. And this would be the Big Bang inflation model. This goes into two parts, or two modes, or two trains of thought. What they subscribe to in these two modes, or one or the other of these modes, would be that the universe originally was either highly compressed and in a condensed state of matter, radiation, and temperature that was very, 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 very compressed, or that the universe came into being from a point of singularity. And that in actuality would mean not that there was a point, that would actually mean that the universe and its density was infinitely compressed, or the matter was infinite and the density was infinitely compressed, where matter, radiation, and temperature was squeezed into a zero point of existence. And when we say a zero point of existence, we should explain that. Because with the singularity, we are saying there was no up, down, forward, backward, left, right, length, breadth, height, or time, meaning that all points were one point. So in actuality, that actually means there was no space, because there was no forward, there was no going backwards, there was no going up, and there was no going down. There was no length, and there was no breadth, and there was no height, and there was no time, where all matter and radiation and temperature was infinitely compressed. That's your singularity. Whichever it is, be it singularity and an infinite density, temperature, and radiation, or you're dealing with a highly compressed state, what we're saying here is that if we took all the structures that we have now from time memorial, or the time of the universe, or the time when structures were built, and when we're saying structures, we're talking about planets or galaxies. If we took them at this state now and they use the general theory of relativity now to take these large structures and then start mathematically breaking them down to their smallest state, where they then go into a different form of science called quantum mechanics or quantum physics. If we took all that exists now and break them down into smaller structures, then obviously you'll end up with your atom. Then you'll go past the atom, past neutrons, past electrons, past protons, go into your quarks, and further still, as far as they can go back, where they squished or squash everything back into a compressed state. At this point of starting is your Big Bang. Scientists do not know what came before the Big Bang or how the so-called bang started, or correctly in scientific circles it will be explained how the expansion started and not a bang. Not that something went bang to them, they're saying it was an expansion. All right, whichever the term you want to use, bang or expansion, you have a point of starting when everything is squashed or crunched together. All right, now the way we'll highlight this to you, we go like this. You have a point of starting. This would be your point, your dot of starting, where everything is compressed. They don't know, remember, what is before the dot, what is before the spot, what is before the singularity. So after the starting, we'll draw it like this. The dot, the spot, the singularity, things begin to move, and then there's a start. In this start, you would have space beginning. After space, we go further. We put an I in there, and the I represents inflation. Now, the reason why we put the I in there, and if you notice, the arrows are getting bigger and bigger, is because inflation is a ballooning of the universe, meaning that inflation is a mechanism that causes the universe to exponentially get bigger. That biggerness will be represented by this third state here. And if I put a factor in of 10 to the power of 26, that will be an approximate of just how big the universe got from this initial state when they add in inflation, which is not proven, which we speak about in the video. Go and watch it, A Universe from Nothing. Really? That talks about inflation in that video towards the end of it. So we have this at 10 to the power of 26, the universe grows to this size, and then at this point there's a more stabilization of growth where dark energy comes into fruition. Dark energy then continues to expand the universe at a more steady rate. Now, dark energy is expanding the universe right now. Okay? That means dark energy, if we can imagine pushing something, dark energy is actually pushing space itself, because if space was born, space is some type of substance. So dark energy is pushing space itself, and in doing so, it is pushing the galaxies wider and wider apart. Now, scientists know that if you then do a calculation, you then are able to crunch back the galaxies and the molecules and the matter and material of this world back to a point of starting through mathematical equations. That's how they know the universe had to have a start of beginning or a point of beginning, because things are getting wider, things are getting bigger, the galaxies are growing further apart, which means they had to have been smaller and smaller and smaller in the beginning. Before they became galaxies, they had to have been molecules, and before that had to have been atoms, and before that subatomic particles, and then you're going back into darkness and you're going back to dark energy. All right? Then you have obviously dark matter. Now, The interesting thing about dark matter is if you take a cake tin or a cake box, or you're about to bake a cake. The reason why I'm using that analogy is for you to get in your mind about what dark matter is in a simple way. Dark matter enabled the fruition of ordinary matter. Unordinary matter is dark matter because scientists do not know what it is, but they know its effect on gravity. They know it exists. It doesn't move. It doesn't interact with any form of light. But as in the cake tin, you put ingredients in the cake tin, things grow. That's dark matter. Dark matter is the basis where the galaxies or the ingredients of the atom were placed within this dark matter. And that allowed for the fruition of what we're calling life. That's what dark matter is responsible for. With dark matter now, or after dark matter, we can now put in that which is the fundamental forces. The fundamental forces would be your gravity, strong force, weak force, and I'll abbreviate it, and electromagnetism, all right? With gravity now, gravity interacts with space. What is so interesting is that the interaction with space and gravity, where matter now interacts with space, then produces gravity, and that interaction with matter and space then allows gravity to then move objects. So what we're saying here is that the interaction with space and matter enables gravity to clump matter together and build larger and larger structures that we now call planets, galaxies, and suns. That is a form of intelligence. The same way as that the blowing up of the universe by inflation is a form of intelligence. The same way that dark energy moving the universe to a greater and greater size at a steady rate in the beginning of the universe is a form of intelligence. The same way as we have the strong force that ties the proton and neutron together so it doesn't fly apart, that allows atoms to grow, is a form of intelligence, because if it wasn't for the strong force, there'd be no holding of the atom. The same way, there's a form of intelligence with the weak force, the other fundamental force, where the weak force enables particles to change into other particles to give birth to different elements. Another form of intelligence, electromagnetism. If you've got a loved one who's going to do a key laser surgery, that's a form of light. Light is electromagnetism. If you didn't have light, we could not exist. The same way we are able to see through visible light. If we move on from the fundamental forces, we can point to the quarks that gave birth to protons, that in turn gave birth to neutrons, and we add in the electrons. And then these three, protons, neutrons, and electrons, we are more familiar with. For instance, we will say gold. And we all like more gold. That is made out of proton, neutrons, and electrons. We'd love plenty of gold. The same way we cannot do without the proton, neutrons, and electrons of oxygen. Oxygen, obviously because we need it to breathe, allows for physical life. Now, we're talking now on the matter, materialization, and structures that have enabled life. But when we're dealing with now biological life, the foundation of biological life is not matter in actuality. It's the unknown vital force called spirit. Why? Because you knocking a wood, you wouldn't say that's biological life, but it has atoms in there. The same atoms in the wood, or the same atoms in everything, is inside of you. The difference being is the vital, necessary force called spirit that is truly unknown, that gives birth to biological life in conjunction with physical material matter properties. So when we're talking about biological life now, we're talking about, on the material level, we're talking about carbon being very crucial. Carbon and obviously hydrogen, and that word DNA, or the acronym. Now, DNA and bacteria will come in at something like 10 to the minus 5 meters, all right? And obviously bacteria progressed and allowed for biological life, where we come into play, or we're talking about mammals, sea life, and human life, all right? And this is to say that the intelligence of moving entities through the advent of spirit that enabled biological life to exist and move is intelligence. The reason why we're emphasizing the word intelligence is because through every step of the way, from the merging of the proton and the electron to form hydrogen, that's intelligence. From the merging of protons, electrons, and neutrons to then produce helium and all your other elements, that's intelligence. From the quarks that produces the proton and neutron, that's intelligence. Every step of the way, we have shown intelligence. The gravity, we know, builds larger structures. That's intelligence. We know the strong force, we said, about binding the nucleus together. Intelligence. The weak force, flipping, transforming one particle to the next to build other elements. Intelligence. Electromagnetism in the form of visible light that we can see, and you'll see in this broadcast. Intelligence. Dark matter allowing ordinary matter to come into play, which we talked about with quarks and protons and neutrons, etc., and allowing gravity and space to build structures like our cosmos or our Milky Way. Intelligence. And these two forms of black intelligence or dark intelligence, they make up the majority of the universe. Dark energy at 73%, and dark matter at 23%. The rest of it, and what you're calling us, or what we're calling life itself, a mere 4%. Dark energy, we said, intelligently pushing space and pushing the galaxies wider. So-called inflation, and we put a question mark there because the scientists don't know if it's true or not. But if inflation existed to springboard or explode the universe to a greater size by the factor of 10 to the power of 26 or 100 trillion size, greater the size than it was, that's intelligence. Space itself coming out of the bang and being created, that is intelligence, because space houses us all. Okay? If these are all form of intelligence, then there was a supreme mind that gave birth to the bang and all these intelligences. My book, Quantum and the Creation of the Universe and Humans, alludes to the supreme mind. And this book, The Sacred Wisdom of Tahuti, Thoth, informs you directly as what is the supreme mind. The producing source of the universe is the supreme mind. And with the details that I've outlined on the board, it is clear that the universe is physical and mental. Yet there is a producing source before the universe, and that is the supreme mind that existed before the Big Bang.